Welcome to the Nice Girls Wear Scrubs podcast. I'm Allie,
I'm Cyndi.
and we are a mother-daughter nursing duo on a mission to change the nursing narrative and unsubscribe to the typical mean girls club. Scorpios by astrology and nurses by choice, we want to share stories, create community, and give you actionable items to love your nursing career again. So let's jump into the episode. How long have you been a nurse?
Well, as much as I hate to admit it, it's been 40 years this year, June. Crazy, right?
Yes.
Whoa. So, yeah, 40 years. And I probably had the same amount of jobs as you have in your 9 years.
Thanks.
So yeah, I started nursing back when I was 18. I went into nursing school. I was super naive. I had no idea what I was doing. And most of the people in my class, because I was an associate degree to begin with, already knew how to take a blood pressure. They knew how to I knew how to take a temperature, but like things like that. We had to give, so this is how long ago it was. We had to give bed baths to each other. So we had to be like naked under the cover and give bed baths. It was crazy. We did NG tubes on each other, and I about quit when we had to do IVs on each other. I was like, and it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. It was because I didn't want somebody to do it to me that didn't know what they were doing. I was like, no way, they're not doing it.
They don't
So,
allow that anymore.
I know it was
Well,
like,
even the IVs, they have to do it on the mannequins.
that's crazy, right? We didn't have that. I'm surprised we didn't put Foley's in each other, but we didn't do that. But I remember
Just
I had a
naked
partner,
bed baths.
right, yeah, I had a partner that was a man, and I was like so nervous. I would remember like so many times wanting to quit, but that also propensitated, however you say, like precipitated the culture as well, because even 40 years ago, it maybe was a little more progressive than it was 50 years ago or 60 years ago, right? So, but I actually think I kind of always wanted to be a nurse. My mom was a CNA at a rehab facility, and I used to go visit her patients, and I loved that. But then there was a period of time when I was a teenager that I used to pass out, and they thought it was because of blood and stuff, but it mostly was just in facilities. And so I think more I got overheated than actually the sight of things, but I wasn't sure and I wasn't positive, and I never thought that I could actually take care of people. So kind of like your story about the vomit, was my great grandfather ended up living with us my senior year of high school. And he wasn't on hospice or anything because that man just wanted to live even when he shouldn't, but he desperately wanted to hold on to life. So we were taking care of him. He ended up having empyema, and he had chest tubes that they were just draining. And so my mom would normally take care of them, but one day, like, she yelled from another room to come in because the chest tube had slipped inside to his incision site, and we had to figure out how to take care of it. So she needed all these stuff. I grabbed it. I helped her pull the tube out and get it resecured. And it was like after that I realized, like, you can do anything you want to do when you put your mind to it. So that's how my career started. Initially back in 1984, that's crazy, right? 1984, I went to school in Oklahoma. I got an associate degree because I wanted to get into work, and I applied at Oklahoma State University, but they wanted me to pay out-of-state fees, and I paid for all my own education and my living expenses and everything. I was really on my own, and my parents couldn't help me. So I picked the cheaper route. It wasn't what I believed. I always believed that we should be an entry-level bachelor's degree, which it's not. I'm not saying there's not a purpose for ADNs. It's just, I believe it will give us more clout in the general public if we all have bachelor's degrees. And I don't even know if there's any way to accomplish that, but I always had that in my mind. So I always wanted to go back to school. And so I went back and moved back with my parents. I was engaged at the time, and I went to work as a pediatric nurse at Kaiser. That was my first job, Kaiser Sunset, a pediatric nurse. And I worked there for only 9 months because we got engaged, I got married, and then we moved to North Dakota. And then when I went to North Dakota, I worked in the ICU, and it was a surgical ICU as well, because at that time, that was in 1985, they were less specialized.
Mhm.
So a lot of the units had all the things, like all the critical care ones went together. There was a lot less specialized units. I loved that unit. I felt like I had one of the best preceptors ever. She's just a fabulous lady. She would give you advice on life and raising children and all these things. And it was a pretty cohesive group, but back then even we had issues, like you towed the line. Back in my first one as a pediatric nurse, me and another new grad started together, and she was way more confident than I was and way more outspoken, and they did not like her. And it was very apparent, but she spoke up for herself. I mean, she should have been like, celebrated, but me, I just did, like, kind of like you said, the yes, I did everything they said. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to learn, and I didn't want to be shunned because of something I said or something they thought. And so I really just did my best to fit in. And then after North Dakota, we lived there 4 years. I worked at the same place for 4 years. I didn't do anything else. I worked in the same unit the entire time. And we had Allie in November 1988. And we moved. So I took off work when she was born. I worked up until the day before she was born. So that also tells you something about like the nursing culture, because that was the norm, like don't take off, just work all the way to and push through. And then we got told that she needed to be delivered because she was too little. And so we went in the night before, and then we were gonna move, but I had to work 5 weeks in order. I mean, I had to come back at 5 weeks in order to get my leave paid for. So if I didn't go back to work at 5 weeks, I didn't get that. I owed them the money back for that 5 weeks. Yeah, so I went back to work for like a week or 2 weeks, something like that. When you're 5 weeks old, it was so hard. And then we drove across the country to California. And my spouse at the time didn't have a job. We just up and moved. He got out of the military and we moved, and he had no job. So I had to go back to work because we needed some money. So I did registry, and registry was relatively new that back in 89. It would have been 1989, like January, and it was relatively new, but they were paying really well. So it was great opportunity. I went to a lot of different ICUs, but there was not the rules and regulations that are now. So like pumping was miserable, and you had to pump in the bathroom. So think about that pump in the bathroom stall. Do you really want to bring that milk home to your baby, right? It was so bizarre. There was none of the accommodations for people back then. And so I wanted a staff job because I felt like a staff job would give me the ability to have a home and maybe create my space at least. So I did registry for about, I want to say like 3-4 months. And I met, this is kind of funny because we didn't have networking back then, but I met somebody that I used to go to high school with. And I happened to do registry at that facility. And she's like, oh my gosh, they have a really great, it's basically, they called it a CCU, but it really was a surgical intensive care for the post-cardiac patients. So I worked there, and kind of funny story is there was doctors that ran it. It was a hospital, but they literally ran the unit and they ran the surgical program them. So think about that, not businessmen, but doctors. So they paid us an ungodly amount of money back in 1989. I worked there for about a year, and they basically ran it into the ground. So they didn't have any money. Yeah. So a lot of the surgeons were at a different facility. And so when talk of that closing, some of us, a few of the ladies that I worked with, they worked at another facility across town. And so I went to that one, but still in the ICU. I didn't venture out of my discipline, right? And so I worked there for 8 years. I had our second son, and I worked there. He was born there. And then Allie's dad, my ex-spouse, got a different job. And so now I've been a nurse about, I think, like 12 years, 13 years, something like that. And we moved up to the Thousand Oaks area, and I ended up getting pregnant with our third child. And then I was looking for a job. So my whole career had either, I just did a short stint in peds and then the rest of it critical care, ICU, CCU, all like same kind of unit, because that's how they lumped them together back then. And then we were up in the area, and then I didn't work for a couple years, and then ended up going through a divorce and needed a job because I didn't have any money. So once again, not knowing anything about finance, I just was like, I gotta go get a job because I don't know what I'm gonna do, right? And so I applied at the local hospital. And they only had an opening in the ER. That's all they had. They didn't have any ICUs. And I'll tell you, I was so nervous about it. But I was always interested in ER. Like my whole, like, I used to moonlight down in the ER, like if they wanted somebody to float. So I'd go down there. And so I got a job in the ER. But the interesting thing is, it was a staff position. There was no union there. And I ended up making about $15 less than I made 2 years earlier down in Orange County. And so Ali talked about some of that regulation of pay, that's crazy. Now think about if you go across the country as well. So the union had
Also,
just, yeah,
you're going to talk about unions, but that's that's the importance of a union is, and the
right,
difference of whether or not you have a union or not, your pay is going to be different.
right. So the union had just come in the year before. And so the pay was low, but that union really did help that facility catch up to a lot of other places. But at the time, they were a private owned hospital. They weren't up with the times and they didn't have incentives.
I remember sitting in the car at some point too when you got like this big pay bump as well. I remember you
Yeah.
talking about it was like a piece of
Mhm.
paper or
Yeah.
something. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember that.
Yes, we did. We got a huge one because they, so a lot of other facilities that had multiple facilities, not just one private hospital, we got bought by a bigger corporation. So they have a lot more now, but we did get a huge bump. Like, I think I got like a $10 bump in pay because by this point, when that happened, I had been a nurse like close to 20 years. And so they gave us years of service. That's the other thing. There's facilities that I have 40 years of experience. I could walk in and make the same as somebody that has 1 year as experience. That they don't give you your years of service, but every other industry does,
Mhm.
but nursing. So then I went to the ER and then I worked there. Wow. So I worked there until they started decreasing our retirement and they started increasing our insurance pay, like what we had to pay out of our paycheck for our benefits, basically. And I had gotten remarried and we had a family of 7 of us that were on our insurance. And I was like, man, how am I gonna keep up with this? Like it was the top pay for good insurance there. And so I ventured out looking for
How
something
much
different and
was
I looked,
that?
oh, I was paying like close to $500 a month back in 2015. But that was my portion on top of, to put it in perspective, me now as an independent contractor, we pay for a family of 3, we pay 900 a month.
Mhm.
So they're only paying 400 for me to work for them and decrease my pay to give me benefits, right? So if you get benefits, they're gonna decrease your pay,
Mhm.
but then they also negotiate all the time what they're gonna give you. So so fast forward, I moved to a different ER, which gave retirement. And they had, and the medical was free. Free. I didn't pay anything out of my check every month. So right there, I got a $500 bump in pay right there. So I went there, but I stayed moonlighting at the one and I moonlighted in interventional radiology. Ali talked about this in the last episode about having multiple jobs. So at that point, I actually had gotten another job, so I worked in the ER and I went to the new facility, but I also did interventional radiology at my old facility. And then I also picked up critical care transport that I would do at night. So literally there will be times that I would go to my day ER job from 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. I'd go pick up the equipment for critical care transport. I'd pray that they didn't call me out, but inevitably they did when I put my head on the pillow. One thing I didn't really like about being on call is being called out after you've already gone into bed. And then I would take the equipment back and I would go to the other day job at interventional radiology. And me thinking I'm per diem, like maybe I'll just get off early, I'm so tired. But all the full-time people there wanted the day off. So if we were light, they'd be like, No, you're per diem, you should work. You don't work any hours, but literally I was working like 70 hours a week at that point. And so a couple factors for that are like, I really just never fashioned my finances in a way that I lived within my means. I was always trying to make ends meet. We had kids that all went to college. We helped them all. We didn't pay for it all, but we helped them all. And there just was always a lot of expenses. And I felt like after going through the divorce, I really was digging myself out of a hole a lot of the time. And I never, I mean, it makes me feel good to think that Ali thinks that we never really were bad off, but it also is not really a great way, because then you don't have that realization. I never wanted my kids to feel like, oh my God, we're broke. I always have to struggle. So I always just worked more. But in the same factors, I wish I would have taught them more about finances growing up and the things that I did go through. So in 2017, Ali's brother, my middle son, got a brain tumor, and he was misdiagnosed at the facility that I worked at. And so, and just kind of the way they treated us in general. I worked at that hospital for nearly 20 years in the same unit, and the way they treated us as a patient, as I was supposed to be part of their family, was just, I don't know, I felt very unenamored with healthcare in general at that point. And I really felt like if they can treat us this way, which maybe that's not the right way to think, but how are they treating everybody else? Instead, it should just be, how do you treat everybody? You know, it shouldn't matter that I work there, that I should get better treatment. Although, I mean, man, if they're not treating us right, then, I mean, so I felt very unenamored, but I still worked at the ER, but I quit that job. So I worked at the ER and did critical care. And then I got introduced to a business, and I started doing my business, and I could drop one of the part-time jobs. So, and then I went to part-time out at an urgent care. And then COVID hit. And then I really just felt like I don't control my time. I don't control my money. And these people are all, I don't know, I just was having a hard time with the culture of the units and the whole
Just
mantra.
healthcare in general too.
Right, yeah. So it was a compounding effect of all of it. And so I built my business up, and then I found infusion nursing because I really wasn't ready to let go of nursing. I love my patients. I mean, whether they're kids, I'm a little different than Ali. I like all my patients. I have patients right now that are in their 70s, and I have patients that are 5 years old. So, and I love them all. Like, I get very attached to my patients, and now I can literally do nursing on my terms. I can actually schedule when I want. I mean, some of it with my clients as infusion, they come into factor too, like what's their schedule like. But really, I can choose to have a day off, or I could choose to have a week off, and then we just negotiate when that schedule would be for them. And so it's much different. I can also sit and negotiate my pay. I had a new person come in just a couple weeks ago and ask me, would you help us out develop this infusion program? I'm like, sure. And then he's like, well, what do you want to get paid? And I told him what I want to get paid. And I said, and if I'm not paid that, then it's not worth it for me. And so I think that as nurses, we really need to be empowered to own what we have. I applied for another job. It didn't end up working out. I thought maybe I'd like it, and now it's probably a good thing it didn't work out. But before I ever even went to the second interview, I was like, this is what I make now. And to take this on, this is what I want to make. And if you're not willing to talk about that, then I'm not interested.
What
And
changed your mindset? Because before you never used to
no,
negotiate. So what
no.
what changed in your mindset of I can negotiate my pay?
So I do believe it was the business, becoming an entrepreneur and realizing that I provide value for people. And just because I'm a nurse doesn't mean that I don't provide value. And then becoming an independent contractor, really realizing that I'm controlling my compensation, not the people. And if they don't want to use me, there's a lot of other people that do. And really, you and I have gone through this a lot about money and, abundance, and like really believing in what happens. And really what I realized as I have gotten older is your time is not renewable. It goes away every night. You put your head on that pillow, or you work nights and you go to bed in the morning if you're a nurse that works nights, right? Whenever you put your head on the pillow, that time ends and you get up, and then it's a new day and you never get that day back. And so coming to realization with that, and realizing money's everywhere. Like, I can make money from anywhere. I can go do like Allie's done injections, like all kinds of stuff.
What did you do with your finances to put you in a position to be able to walk away from jobs and not feel like you had to just keep taking more, or kind of like what you were talking about, applying to jobs and being like, well, if they don't give me what I want, then I'm just not going to take it.
Right. That's a great question. So I truly believe when I got into I have a financial business, and when I got into it, one of the really great things that the education they provided was look at your bottom dollar. I just did this with somebody the other day. They're kind of running and things are kind of all over. And I said, well, you got to look at your bottom dollar. So whether you have a business, whether you have a part-time job or a per diem job, what's your bottom dollar that you need to survive? Of course you want to save, and of course you want to pay off debt. But if you don't know what your bottom dollar is and you don't know what you need, then you're not willing to give up those jobs because you're just keep running with your finances. And the other thing, and Allie's been really big about this, is just tracking it. Money will go wherever if you don't track where it goes. You will look back and you'll be like, I mean, I've made millions of dollars in my lifetime, and it feels really great to say that. But, I didn't wake up till about 10 years ago, maybe less than 10 years ago. Our son's medical event really opened my eyes to things. And so kind of refashioned a lot of things. And what I truly believe is whatever you want to accomplish, you can back engineer it and you can save for it. If it's money driven, time driven. And the other thing I realized is my time's valuable. I'm not kidding anymore.
And your expertise is valuable.
Right. And for so long, and I really want to delve into an episode about this, is that nurses are devalued, but nurses can do anything. I reach out to people to partner with all the time, and they'll be like, well, I don't have any experience in that. And I'm like, but you don't need it. You have so much experience. We educate people on a daily basis. We teach people about how to work their life. How do they fit their disease process into their life? How do they manage all that's going on? A lot of people that have medical issues, they have to navigate their life, and we are the person that's doing that, whether it's at the bedside, home health, hospice, a procedural place, whatever that is. Nurses have way more knowledge than they give themselves credit for, and then the public gives them credit for. We navigate a lot. Even just think about it in the hospital. We revere doctors so much, right? However, we navigate all that. We navigate all the care. Somebody was navigating our son's care, but maybe just not in the right way. And, they didn't look at the CAT scan, and they didn't relay those messages, and they didn't take care of the things they needed to take care of. But nurses navigate a lot. And then the other thing is, I sat down with a lineman for Southern California Edison. Okay, it doesn't have to be that, but that's the type of company they work for. They make a large amount of money because their job is risky, right? They go climb
like
the
high risk,
lines,
high reward.
High risk, yeah, high risk, right? But not for anybody else, but for themselves. It's high risk for themselves. But nursing is high risk for the people you take care of, because you have to take care of them appropriately. And it's also high risk for yourself, because there's a lot of things in nursing that happens. And so I think we need to get compensated for all that we do. We take on so much, and we're required to take on so much. And it's about time that we valued what we provide, who we are, and the knowledge that we have, even just to pass the NCLEX. I mean, it's crazy.
So you missed the whole part when you got your master's in education and you were a manager for a while. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so that was in the stint of the 20 years at the one facility. So I was in the ER for a long time, and then I decided finally, after getting a divorce, I always want to go back to school, but there was always something else that needed to be done. Kids, this, that. But as they got older, I was like, I'm going to go back to school. I need to figure out what more can we do in nursing? I really want to change culture. I want to change procedure. I want to take better care of the patients. And there was just a lot of stuff out there. So I went back and got my bachelor's degree first in 2010. And my goal was to graduate my bachelor's degree before Allie did. And I did that, which was pretty awesome. Yay me. And then, so I got that. And then I got interested in management, because they give you administration classes there. And then we were changing, our unit was changing. And in the time that I graduated, our boss was a director, interim director, and she was getting need a manager. So I had already wrote a lot of policies. I had already done things on procedures and unit stuff. I was on committees. I had done the clinical ladder. And so I was really interested in being the manager. My thought was that you could change it, kind of like what we want to do with this, on the inside out. And I was like on the boots on the ground doing it. And I thought, I have this knowledge, now I can change it, make it better for everybody. But the reality is, so then I went back and started my master's. I got a new job as the manager, which actually was more hours than I was doing,
And not
you
more
know,
pay,
as a step,
really.
not more pay, yeah. And the problem with being a middle manager, not the director and not charge, you really don't belong anywhere the way our culture is set up. So you're really like smashed in the middle. And I'm gonna be totally honest on here, the CEOs and the COOs, they don't really care about your patients. They don't care how you take care of them. If you work for a for-profit hospital, they care about the bottom line.
Money.
They're a business, the money. They really are. I sat on a meeting with a CEO of a large corporation, and he said the three Ps, and I'm not gonna remember the three Ps, but I can tell you that not one of them was patient. And I was like, I was waiting for patient, like I thought it was gonna be number one, no profitability. Number two, no, I don't remember what that was. Number three, nope, not patient either. I was like, wow, that was when my eyes were open. I was like, these people don't even care. So when I come to them with a problem or something that we need to change, they don't care if it doesn't make them more money. And then the other issue that I ran into with being a manager was like, they didn't care that it didn't work. They just wanted you to figure out how to make it work and not
Which
tell
we're
them.
really good about workarounds. We will figure out
Right,
a way to work around whatever
right.
issue there is.
Right, exactly. However, if it's not changing it for everybody and you're not changing procedure and process, then you have a greater chance when you do workarounds
With
to have
liability.
mistakes,
Mhm.
right? Exactly. And so one of the things that I was really passionate in that time was, if somebody came out, and I'm sure many of you that are listening have experienced this if you're a nurse, is that, oh my gosh, this mistake happened or something happened, and they go back to that one nurse that it fell out on, instead of looking at the process. How did the process fail them? And
Mhm.
so that was my thing, is that you need to walk back and see. So this brings me to our son. And one of the reasons I left that facility was that when we went back to my son, I went to the facility and said, how do we backtrack to make sure this doesn't happen again? And they didn't really want to work on the process. They just wanted to blame, and, we'll leave it at that. But if you really have processes set in place where everybody, it can't fail, then now you protect the nurses and the patients,
Mhm.
right? And you give better care for your patients. So I ended up getting my master's, but then I ended up stepping down and becoming the charge nurse for quite a long time until I left the facility. And I loved being in charge. I really did. I felt like I did a really great job. I navigated. I feel like I'm really good at navigating, communicating, and I'm really good at for other people is taking everything on. So for example, like if this person needs lunch, I can manage their patient and manage the unit and do it all, right? So that all the staff, all the doctors are taken care of. But the one thing that I wasn't good at is taking care of myself. And if you're going to be a good leader, you have to learn to take care of yourself, because at some point, all that's going to come, and I'm going to tell a funny story, and it might be kind of, so in that ER, we were changing from handwritten charting and orders to doctor inputted orders, which some of you on here may never have heard of that, but literally the doctors would just write it. You put it in this little slot, and then the secretaries or unit clerks would put them in the computer. The doctors wouldn't put them in the computer. And so we changed the whole thing, and it was super stressful. We got extra staff, but basically everybody would come to me like, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And I had to navigate all this stuff. And so all of a sudden at the end of the shift, like we were getting an ambulance in and stuff, and we got that settled. And then I was like, man, I don't feel very good, and all of a sudden I went to the pantry and I was like, just threw up everywhere. I feel like I didn't take a break all day. I didn't go to the bathroom, nothing. I just took on everything that everybody had, all the disgruntled, the unhappiness, the stress, not figuring it out. And man, it came out because it was like, there it was. I was like, whoa. And so I realized that day was that in order to be a good leader, you really have to take care of yourself too. Like I deserved a lunch like everybody else. So somebody, myself, should have figured out how to make that happen, so.
So what is your favorite part of nursing, or the what do you love about nursing?
Oh, I love getting to know the people and knowing that I get to help making them feel better or navigate. Some people aren't going to get better, but navigate what they have so that they can have a better quality of life.
What advice would you give someone who wants to make a change in nursing?
That's a good question. I would sit with, what is it that you want to do? What are you looking to accomplish? And I would actually sit down with your goals. Like, look out the next 5 years, and where do you want to be in 5 years or maybe 10 years, and back engineer that. And if what you're thinking about taking isn't going to get you to that end goal, then maybe evaluate why you want to go there. I know Ali talked a lot about in our last episode. I listened to this person. They told me I should do this, which is good because it broadens your perspective. But at the end of the day, you should listen to your heart and you should figure out what resonates with you. I've had some things recently that I've changed some situations because for a year I just wasn't aligned with what I was doing. And you won't be successful if you're not aligned. So whether it be the corporation, the management, or the staff, if you don't align with what they're doing or how they treat people and how they treat patients, then I would say that's a no.
Our mission with this podcast is to create a community of nurses who want to change the field from the inside out. If this podcast resonated with you, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. It helps you stay up to date with future podcast episodes, and it also makes sure we create a large community of nurses who want to change the field.